Chapter 4, Section 9, Social Movements, The Struggle for Equality, Part 1. Social movements. Social movements can be broadly defined as collective challenges to authority to achieve collective goals. Authority can be either governmental, political, or social, and it is frequently a combination of all three. The history of social movements in America is different from that of other countries, in large part because of the unusually strong protections for individual rights written in our foundational legal documents, such as the Bill of Rights. Alongside this is the emphasis on equality in our national mythos. In documents like the Declaration of Independence, America is portrayed as a land of opportunity, where all people are created equal, and a place not bound by the rules of hereditary aristocracy, as European countries were. The emphasis on equality of opportunity is a common theme in American rhetoric, and notably can be seen in times of national crisis, like the Civil War and the Cold War, among others. It is the tension between that lofty rhetoric and a less than equal application of the laws that prompted the growth of social movements in this country, especially after the Civil War. The women's rights movement, along with the civil rights movement and LGBTQ rights movement that followed, started with people who wanted the United States to uphold its promise of legal equality to all citizens. Composition. Successful movements in America share many traits. They are generally comprehensive, being comprised of individuals and groups that represent diverse perspectives within a given community, but united around a shared goal or ideal. Movements often pursue multiple strategies at the same time, depending on the size of the movement. Mass movements, characterized by participation of ordinary citizens, are usually led by community elites who can marshal broad support from the different people and organizations the movement must work with. Leadership can come from within the movement's ranks as well, as members attend training and gain experience in activism. This is how Rosa Parks came to be involved in the civil rights movement before she precipitated the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955. Sometimes movements grow slowly and accrue support over time, and sometimes they seem to grow very quickly in response to a catalyst, either international or domestic. The Seneca Falls Convention in 1848 is considered such a catalyst for the women's rights movement in America, especially in promoting suffrage as a movement goal. The gay rights movement is another example, as that movement is commonly said to have begun with the June 1969 Stonewall riots. The LGBTQ rights movement quickly adopted the kind of political tactics used by the women's and civil rights movements, pressuring medical groups to remove homosexuality from a list of mental disorders and working to create legal protections for gays and lesbians on a state-by-state and community-by-community basis. Groups and organizations are an important part of movements, as they contribute organizational structure and can work independently toward movement goals. Important groups for the women's rights movement include the National Women's Party, headed by Alice Paul, who was instrumental in the addition of Title VII to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibited discrimination based on sex in public accommodations. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, was one of the major groups involved in the civil rights movement and litigated the central civil rights cases, most famously Brown v. Board of Education, 1954. In the later stages of the women's movement, the National Organization for Women, NOW, founded by Betty Friedan and other activists, pushed for changes in domestic violence law and supported what would become Title IX. Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972, signed into law by President Nixon, invalidated discrimination on the basis of sex in federally funded education. It drastically changed the composition of higher education, and eventually the workplace, by removing structural barriers that had prevented women from entering a variety of professional and educational fields.